What's up, friends? I got a brand new video for you today, and today we're going to take a look at the newly released X-E4. And it's been a couple years since the X-E3 was released back in 2017, and this camera has been fully redesigned. It has a more minimal, classy look, and I really like how it looks. And I also have the newly released version of the 27mm f2.8 pancake lens along with it, and you can also get this with the X-E4 in a kit. So in this video, I want to take a look at the camera as well as the new lens and see what Fuji's brought to the table at the start of 2021. And I'll make sure to timestamp this video if you just want to see more info on this lens. So as I said before, this camera has been fully redesigned. It's slimmed down. It's gotten a more simplified look to it. It has a magnesium alloy top and a polycarbonate body for the rest of the construction to keep the weight down. And I really love the look of this camera. It's got kind of like a X100V vibe to it, but without an optical viewfinder. And when it comes to specs, they're actually really similar as well. But this camera is actually lighter and smaller than the X100V, which is kind of crazy. So if I'm gonna be completely honest, most of Fuji's current lineup right now is gonna give you the exact same image quality and autofocus performance because they're all running the exact same processor and 26 megapixel X-Trans 4 sensor. Because of that, I didn't spend a ton of time shooting photos with this camera with the purpose of speculating image quality and autofocus because I've already done that on other Fuji cameras with the exact same processor sensor combo. Cameras like the X Pro 3, the X-T4, the X100V, as well as the recently released XS10. Now obviously as time has progressed since those cameras have come out, there's been firmware updates that have made the autofocus better, but I have a feeling that when this comes out and is released, it's gonna have that newest firmware as well. So I'll make sure to put the links of those reviews of those cameras in the description because I made a ton of content related to image quality and autofocus, and you guys can check that out. So that said, throughout this video, I'm gonna be showing pictures that I took with this camera, as well as shots I've taken with other Fuji cameras that have the exact same sensor, because like I said, they have the exact same sensor, they're gonna have the exact same output. So some design changes over the X-E3 is that this camera's been slimmed down. It's more of like a brick now. There's no hand grip, there's no bump here. There's also no thumb grip at the back. So ergonomically, you'd probably think this is a bad idea, especially if you have big hands. Might be a little uncomfortable to hold. Thankfully, Fuji's come out with a couple of accessories like the extended metal hand grip, as well as the rear thumb grip as well. So if you think you need more grip, at least you can get something to do that. I just assumed that they probably wanted to slim the camera down, make it much smaller and lighter, and that's kind of why they went with this design. They've also removed the focus selector switch from the front of the camera, which I honestly like having on a Fuji camera, but I guess now you just have to choose from the Q menu, or you could program the function button on top to set that up for your focus modes. I currently have mine set to the ISO because there's no ISO dial on this camera. It only has one front command dial and no rear command dial, and I have that programmed for shutter and aperture, and you can toggle between the two just by pushing the button because it's also a button as well. Other than that, the back of this camera is super minimal. There's just a joystick, there's no D-pad, so you use the joystick to select autofocus points as well as navigate the menu. And below the joystick is the menu button, and they've moved the play button up beside the drive button instead of under the menu button. So, you know, there's not really a lot going on in the back of this camera, which is kind of nice for this type of camera. And I'm just assuming they're expecting you to use the touchscreen and the Q menu. It now has a 1.6 million dot tilting touchscreen that also flips all the way up so that you can see yourself for vlogging or taking selfies. It kind of shares the same issue as the Sony a6000 lineup where it flips up, and if you wanted to put a shotgun mic on the hot shoe, it actually blocks the screen. Speaking of mic, it has a 3.5mm mic input, which is nice to see over the 2.5mm. There's also a micro HDMI output that can do 4K 30 frames per second, 10-bit 422. They've also included a USB-C port on this camera to do charging and powering the camera. And with that USB-C, they've also included a dongle for a headphone jack if you want to go from USB to headphone jack. And this camera is still powered with the same NPW 126S battery that's in pretty much all the Fuji cameras except for the X-T4. So I really haven't talked about performance or the like little specs of this camera yet. And it's because, as I mentioned, it's nearly the same as all the other current cameras that are in this cycle. And if Fuji was a car company, they're basically using the same engine in different car bodies. That's kind of what they're doing. And this thing is nearly identical in specs as the newly released XS10, except without IBIS, but it has the same capabilities, and I reviewed that a couple months ago, so make sure to check out that video. We went on a road trip and got some awesome images. Okay, so 26 megapixel sensor, 100% phase detection coverage, Autofocus down to -7 EV, 8 frames per second mechanical shooting, all the way up to 30 frames per second electronic shutter. That's blackout free. And of course, it has all the awesome film simulations as well as the newer classic negative and Eterna bleach bypass. And honestly, the film simulations make Fuji the best in the business for straight out of camera JPEGs. I think I've covered all the major things that are on this camera. I kind of want to move on to the new lens on here, the 27mm f2.8 RWR that you can also buy with a kit with this camera. So the original 27mm f2.8's been out for a long time. I think it was released in like 2013, so it's been out for a while now. It's definitely due for an update, and this new version improves a lot of things, some of the shortcomings of the old version. This new version has an aperture ring built into it with an auto lock button on it, so the old version didn't have that. It's really nice and kind of gives it more of like a premium feel. It also gives a faster ability to change aperture. And I think it's crazy that it's basically the exact same size with the addition of the aperture ring on it. It's only slightly heavier. So they made it weather sealed. There's a rear gasket on the back. And when it's on the camera and paired with the X-E4, it's nearly a pocketable setup. It's pretty close to the X100V, to be honest. And I actually prefer the focal length of this 27mm over the X100V's 23mm. I kind of like the extra reach. Also noticed in the box that there was a little screw-on lens hood, and it's made out of metal and it just screws directly onto the inner part of the lens. And it also comes with a little push-on cap for that lens hood if you choose to leave it on instead of using the main cap that comes with this lens. I don't know how effective this lens hood is because I haven't seen the sun come out in weeks. It's wintertime here in Canada and sun is pretty rare to come out once in a while, so I haven't been able to test that out. I did ask Fuji to send me the original version of the 27mm so I could compare the differences. Unfortunately, I got a silver one, but at least it lets me test the autofocus and image quality, and let's see what's improved. Let's take a look at that. The first test I want to show is face and eye detection in video, and it's going to be the continuous eye tracking with the default settings. I'm walking towards the camera here. You can see the eye detection is pretty good, but pay attention to the background at how jumpy and kind of choppy it looks. It's not all that smooth, and also the motor noise is really loud. Next, moving over to the older 27mm f2.8, you can see the tracking is quite a bit laggy, quite a bit more choppy. When it's tracking my face here, it's not really all that reliable, and it actually thinks the back of my head or my coat is a face. I wouldn't really trust this lens for autofocus and video, and the motors are also equally just as loud. When it comes to autofocus in photos, as you can see, single point here, jumping back and forth. It's pretty fast. This is the old lens. There's a little bit of a jitter, and then when you jump to the new lens, it's dead on. It locks right on. It's equally just as fast, but I just feel like it's a little bit more confident. So all that said, there must be a little bit of improvements to the autofocus on the newer lens, but it still has kind of the same loud, noisy motor. So I just want to take a quick look at some comparisons between the old 27mm with the new 27mm, and I can't find any information from Fuji on if there was any optical changes between these two lenses. I think they're nearly the same, but I did notice if we punch in here that you can see the old lens on the left and the new lens on the right. It's actually quite a bit sharper, and this was shot at the exact same settings, both at f2.8, and as you can see, as far as the image itself, they look pretty much near exactly the same. And this runs true through all these shots. In this shot, you can definitely see how much more sharpness there is in the center of the lens. It looks a little bit soft here on the old lens and nice and sharp here on the new lens. There's still a little bit of chromatic aberration. You can see it here. Obviously, these are JPEGs because I can't look at the raw files, so some things are going to be corrected, like vignetting. Jumping this shot, they look almost nearly exactly the same. If I punch in here, I couldn't even really tell much of a difference. Maybe the lines here are a little bit more prominent on the new lens, a little bit sharper. But again, these are the exact same settings, and there's hardly any difference in comparing these two lenses. They're nearly exactly the same, just maybe a little bit sharper on the new lens. When it comes to characteristics of this lens, it's not perfect, but I do love lenses that aren't perfect sometimes. And it has kind of an oval-shaped bokeh. It has a 7-blade aperture, and it has a minimum focus distance of 34 centimeters, so you can get in there nice and close. So that pretty much covers everything that I can think of. There's only a few things that stand out that I don't really like about this camera. And the first one being that I wish they would have kept the dedicated focus selector on the front of the camera. That's actually one of my favorite features on Fuji cameras. There's also no dedicated switch or button for video mode, so you have to go down to the drive mode, all the way down to the bottom of the list and switch it to video. And to some people, you might find the camera's ergonomics not ideal because it's kind of a brick. I understand the styling of this camera and I actually think it looks awesome, but there's always gonna be, you know, an option, I guess, to put the hand grip on it and the thumb grip so you can get more ergonomics. I also want to mention that there's a 30-minute record limit in video, so that's per clip, so you can record up to 30 minutes and then restart the recording. And when it comes to the lens, the 27mm f2.8 RWR, obviously the focus breathing is pretty bad as we saw in the test, and the autofocus motors are still kind of noisy, so if you're planning on using this for video, keep that in mind. It doesn't seem like they really changed that design of the lens that much. But other than that, it's a nice little camera. The lens works nice on it. You don't have to worry about kind of compromising your image quality, especially if you're using other lenses. The autofocus is faster than this lens. You're getting something that looks the size of the X100V, which I personally love the look of. It's one of my favorite looking cameras, but with the ability to put any XF lens on it. So it's pretty affordable. It also comes in black and silver with the new option to get this with the 27mm kit, and it'll be 150 US or 1300 Canadian for the kit. The body by itself is 799 US or 1050 Canadian, and the lens by itself is 400 US or 520 Canadian, and it's going to be out sometime at the end of February or March. If you're thinking about ordering this, I'll put links in the description. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike this video, give it a thumbs down twice. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Our pancake lens, dust. Why is there so much dust? Recently, the XS10V, as well as the most of Fuji's current lineup. Oh, a train, nice. I like when trains cut me off. Per second. Oh, another train, nice. Oh, so ergonomically, you look at the person while you're looking in the camera.